Hello, in this video we will discuss about the signaling transduction mechanism. So we will generalize it and we will also mention with example. So what is cell signaling? First of all, we should need to understand. So cell signaling, for example, the ligand or some molecule, growth factor or growth inhibitor will be bound with the receptor of the cell, will target to the DNA with the second messenger intracellularly will be activated, will express the DNA to produce protein. So it can be intracellular signaling contains second messenger and signaling protein. So let's begin to understand the signal transduction pathway. So signal transduction pathway we will discuss with the generalized with the second messenger and the ligand. So here is the plasma membrane of the cell. This plasma membrane of the cell, which that is the plasma membrane, you can understand here. And in this way here is the extracellular molecule effector. This effector will be bound with the receptor or some receptor, but here is we can generalize. So this is the effector will bond with the receptor in the cytosol. The intracellular domain will be activated. So this is the extracellular matrix and intracellular matrix within the cell. So this is the protein will be bound. That protein is known as collectively scaffold protein. This scaffold protein will be bound. After the binding, the signal will be transduced and relay protein will be activated by this enzymatically a scaffold protein's activation. And in this way here is the yellowish color look like this is the relay protein, a round pink color showing in the figure. After this, this protein here is the next protein will be attached. With this attached, the cascade of phosphorylation will be occur. In this way, there are multiple pathway that is the alternative signaling pathway. This alternative signaling pathway will be target to the different protein for different purpose. So the amplifier and transducer protein will be increased. In this way, the second messenger, for example, will transduce, and the transducer protein will be small intracellular mediators. Second messenger will be activated. This can be a different type, and there are many small intracellular mediators will be formed. This activation will lead to alternative signaling pathway cascade, and in this way the different protein will be activated for the cell death or cell growth. So in this way the next is the second messenger will be activate the anchoring protein bind with the cytoskeleton, and for example, and in this way the modulator protein will be can be inhibit this function. So this is the yellowish color, that is the protein activation after the second messenger activation. After the second messenger activation, the alternative signaling pathways also affect this yellowish color protein, and in this way this protein will be anchoring modification, and anchoring protein will be anchored with the cytoskeleton. After the cytoskeleton anchoring, the modulator protein can be inhibit this reaction, but the messenger protein will be formed ultimately by the phosphorylation of the cascade of phosphorylation will become a transcription factor. So this transcriptional factor will target the DNA. For example, I am drawing here, this is the messenger protein. This messenger protein is well known because it will be bound with the DNA with the target protein. Target protein is the receptor protein, for example, with the bind with the DNA for transcription, with the target gene transcription. This target gene transcription is the signal response, will lead to produce the messenger RNA during the transcription, will lead to give the response by the protein synthesis. So anyhow, this is the upstream to downstream movement of the cascade of phosphorylation of the different protein will lead to transcription factor. This is the mechanism for effector to effector. So this I am generalizing here is the effector to the signals. signal to the second messenger activation, for example cyclic AMP, and after the cyclic AMP the effector. Effector mean the response, for example the synthesis of protein with the signaling transduction pathway. So anyhow, here is I am exemplifying with a neuromuscular junction. So the motor neuron will be uh, synaptic gap, synaptic junction, the neuromuscular junction with the skeletal muscle cell. And in this way here you can see this is the neuron terminal will be bound with a muscle fiber, muscle cell. So the signal transduction for muscle contraction is muscle contraction requires neuron and bulb for primary messenger acetylcholine, for example, as a ligand will bind with the receptor and change the physiology of the cell for contraction of the actin and myosin, the sarcomere. So the neurotransmitter for muscle contraction by signaling and electrical depolarization of myofiber, for example. So let's keep in mind this is the signaling transduction mechanism with example. For example, the muscle contraction. A lot of signaling transduction mechanism. For example, the light signaling transduction in the eyes, rod, and cone cell. So this is the neuromuscular junction. Let's begin to understand. This is the acetylcholine neurotransmitter containing vesicle with a synaptic knob of the motor neuron as an effector will be exocytosed and acetylcholine will be released in the extracellular matrix. After this releasing will bind with the target receptor, acetylcholine receptor. This acetylcholine receptor, this is the primary messenger ligand. This acetylcholine will be bound when the sodium gated channel will be open. After the opening of the sodium gated channel due to the acetylcholine dependent channel, this will lead to influx of the sodium will lead to depolarization of the inner and outer cytoplasmic membrane. So inner will be depolarization. In this way, the more negative inside, and in this way, the more negative will more trigger the sodium channel open due to the depolarization. So in this way, the voltage gated sodium channel will be open one by one, move toward the transverse tubule of the myocyte, for example, the muscle fiber. So this transverse tubule will lead to calcium trigger. Calcium gated channel will be triggered to open, and the DHPR, this is known as, this is the calcium channel. So the extracellular calcium will move in. It is known as a calcium influx. And after this, the PYR receptor protein which that will receive and bind with the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which that is occur in the T tubule. So in this way here you can see the calcium containing sarcoplasmic reticulum will trigger to outflux of the calcium. After the sarcoplasmic reticulum will outflux of the calcium will lead to increase the cytoplasmic calcium. After the increasing of the cytoplasmic calcium level, bind with the calcium with the troponin with the sarcomere, troponin containing protein with the actin, and in this way the actin and troponin containing, and this is the pink color shows that titin will be bind with the myosin protein. So the myosin is the thick protein and actin is the thin protein will give the C to Z line is known as sarcomere and contain an isotropic and isotropic band which contain a sarcomere. This is the model of sarcomere. And this myosin and actin bridge formation occur when the calcium will be bound. So calcium will trigger the binding bridge of the myosin and actin due to the troponin bind with the calcium. So for the muscle contraction is known as the effector from the effector neurotransmitter. So this is the rapid response, but the late response after again and again workout will lead to PI3K pathway will trigger the IP2 to convert due to the phospholipase C enzyme to splicing to produce the IP3 by the phosphorylation. IP3 is basically trigger the calcium outflux from the endoplasmic reticulum, and this calcium IP3 sensitive calcium channel are present in the endoplasmic reticulum will lead to outflux of the calcium will more rushing the calcium into the cytoplasm will be bound with the troponin for contraction of muscle as an effector. So this is known as the neuromuscular junction, and this is the skeletal muscle cell. So this is known as the signaling transduction mechanism. I hope you are getting this concept, and this is the cell signaling. So in this way we had covered the signal transduction pathway generally and with exemplification. So thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe, like and share. We will see in the next video about the other pathway.